Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender, joined by Brian Henry. And Brian, the skid is over. The Madison Square Garden curse is not yet lifted, but Marquette gets an 86-54 resounding victory and maybe gets the monkey off their back with a huge win over St. John's in the first round of the Big East tournament.
Go tell it on the mountain, Chris Mullin. F that guy. He is not the greatest coach in North America. Thank God, Mike, that tonight came. As you said, the streak is over, and Marquette is back in the win column for what feels like forever. I know it was only like a little over 2 weeks ago, but my God, it feels like we haven't won a game in God knows how long. Mercifully, it came in postseason. That's fantastic. You win at a place, like you said, that we typically just do not have success, and it was nice to have a laugher. That was as comforting. That was as perfect a game as you could ask for as a Marquette basketball fan tonight, considering the circumstances.
For studious fans of the Real Chili Podcast, they will no doubt recall you saying, in your own words on the last pod, that the best thing for this team in this first game for them in the Big East tournament would be a laugher where they just, shot the ball incredibly well, played great defense, and that's exactly what happened. I want to walk through the game a little bit. Folks, just so you know, this is going to be a quick hitter pod because it is late at night and we wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of our thoughts. But, Brian, I got to tell you what I think set the tone for this entire game. They mentioned it on the broadcast. It was so clear from the start of this game that Marcus Howard was intent on distributing the ball and getting his teammates involved. There was one point, maybe around the 12-minute mark in the first half, he'd only taken one shot, and he had made it, and I think he got fouled on another one. He was clearly looking to distribute. The most heartening thing about that to me is he had a few days off, the coaching staff had a few days off, and they diagnosed the problem correctly, and they found a way to solve the problem. And that contributed, in my opinion, not only to the win, but to the tone, the attitude of this team. That, to me, was the biggest thing that I took away from this game.
I really don't think you could have said that any better. And I'm not sure how much else that there is to add to it.
Should we wrap?
You're absolutely – yeah, I think let's go out on a high note. You got us right there. No, I mean, basically, you're right. I mean, and it's not fair. I think I said on the last pod too. It's not fair to put it all on Marcus, but we acknowledge that he didn't play well in those 4 losses, especially down the stretch. And it hurts when your best player is not playing like your best player. He was our best player tonight, and the whole team contributed into making him that, and he was a big part of it as well. 30 points. 11 for 11 from the free throw line, on a very efficient 8 for 15 from the field, and oh, by the way, 4 dimes, 7 boards. I mean, that was as well. That was the Big East Player of the Year you saw tonight. Kick the ass of St. John's and Shamorie Ponds, something we have not done really in the last 2 years. And that was, I would say, at this point, all things considered, one of the more satisfying wins of the season because it's a team we struggle with, like you said, and we haven't been playing well. Wojo, the coaching staff deserves credit. They went into the lab, helped figure out what the heck was wrong, what was going on. The team responded, and they delivered one of their best games of the year.
Are you looking at the box score right now?
I am.
Well, could you, if you haven't already looked, how many points do you think Shamorie Ponds put up?
I don't. You know what? I'm not. I have not. I have Marquette in front of me. I don't have St. John's in front of me, so I could probably guess. Let's see. Shamorie Ponds, I'll peg it. He did a little bit. 15?
Yeah,
16 maybe?
13 points, 1 turnover.
Okay.
He was 4 of 14 from the field.
Yep. I mean, he was there, but he was not dominant.
Right.
And as much as we're lauding Marcus, this game was defined by Marquette defensively. Holding that St. John's team that had really tuned you up on the offensive end in 2 meetings this year, that was hands down our best defensive performance against that team, and you saw it from everywhere. It was help defense was excellent. Ball screen defense was excellent. They hounded Pons all over the court. I was happy. There wasn't a guy out there where, I mean, yeah, people make mistakes during the course of a game, but that was, again, one of the better collective defensive efforts of the season against an elite offensive player. And we were terrific. And again, props to the coaching staff as well there. Had them ready to play. They executed it.
Absolutely. And I think the 2 guys that are worthy of being singled out in particular for their defense against Mr. Pons, Sakara Nim and Brendan Bailey. When you have both of those guys out there and St. John's is running switches or we're switching on St. John's picks up top, it doesn't help Shamori to run a pick and switch on to Brendan Bailey. And so that gives Marquette a real advantage because you don't allow Shamori to switch on to a weaker defender. I thought Brendan Bailey, you're going to give up buckets to Shamori Pons because he's an NBA talent. He's a lottery talent. But I thought Bailey played terrific defense on him in spots, and so did Sakar. Now, St. John's may have had a historically bad shooting night. They shot 3 for 20 from the three-point line. That's 15%, folks. That was undoubtedly Marquette's defense had a part of that. Part of it, though, is St. John's just, shot like shit. They were saying on the broadcast, they have tired legs. They played last night. Don't give me that crap. These are kids. I know they're tired. They had 24 hours of rest. This was a great performance from Marquette in a bad shooting night from St. John's, and Marquette capitalized. And like you said, Brian, we got contributions from everyone on the roster.
To that point you just made, not to turn this into the Red Storm pod, but this is what St. John's has been all year. They look excellent one day. Yeah. They look like a team you don't even recognize the next. I mean, some of the St. John's accounts I follow just to see reaction as they're going throughout the year. I mean, they're pulling their hair out with this group because they don't understand how they could look, so fantastic for stretches against us and obviously Villanova. And then, right, you play the same teams, different teams, whether it's DePaul or whomever, Xavier. This is what St. John's has been all year. It's a reason why they deserve to be a bubble team. They have 12 losses. They've earned every single one of them because you're right. They, as well as we played, they were equally as lousy, which leads to a game where you win by pretty much where you drill someone by 30 points. And that's what tonight became.
It was a relatively quiet game for the vast majority of the time. There was some excitement from the crowd late in the first half when Marcus Howard really started to kind of find his groove. But for the most part, it was a subdued game, which I'm fine with. The crowd wasn't into it. St. John's, we should highlight this actually. I wanted to mention this. St. John's made a run around the 14, 15-minute mark in the second half, and they cut the lead to 6. The lead had been 13 or 14. They cut the lead to 6. I believe it was 43-37, and Marquette proceeded to go on something like an 18-2 run or 16-0 run. A terrific response because the crowd was in it at that point. St. John's had a couple of breakaways and maybe an and one in there as well. But at that moment, I texted the group and I said, well, here we go. So impressed with Marquette's response to that. Yeah, St. John's didn't have it tonight, but those are moments in the past 4 games where Marquette has begun to lie down, and they didn't do it this time.
Everyone would be lying to themselves when at that moment, I remember it exactly as you said it, when they came down, I think it was coming out of the under 16 media timeout where they'd cut it to 6 coming out of the timeout, and you just went, oh, Jesus, is this –
it was a here we go.
Is it this again? Is it right? And you're right. You're like, is it this again? And within 5 minutes, you're like, oh no, it's not. Thank God. It was the exact opposite of that. You're right. They put the pedal to the floor and just pulled away from him and never looked back. I mean, that was incredibly welcoming because you're right. We have not handled that. Well, it's funny. As a whole for the season, I think we've handled opposing teams throwing a punch and then hitting back pretty well. Mm-hmm. But in the last 2 weeks, which feels like an eternity, we haven't at all. So tonight was a very important step that they were able to do that.
Some other guys that gave Marquette some good minutes tonight. Chartouni ended up with 12 minutes. He had 5 points, 3 rebounds, and 0 turnovers. So a good performance from Chartouni. He got more run than I think he's used to. Marcus wasn't in foul trouble, but it seemed like they were trying to pace Marcus. Marcus only ended up with 29 minutes, so didn't really, put him to his full extent. And I thought Ed Morrow finished with 8 points, 8 rebounds. Really had a solid performance, as did Theo John. So an all-around good performance. This was one of those wins from Marquette where people were filling their role. Marcus ended up with 30 points. Sakar had 13. Sam had 10. It just felt like everybody knew their role within the context of this game and played it about as well as they could. As a Marquette fan, that's all you can ask for. And now, Brian, we turn our attention to Friday night. Marquette is going to face the winner of Seton Hall and Georgetown. That game, I guess, just tipped off, so we don't know the outcome of that game and won't know for another few hours. But Marquette's going to turn around in 24 hours and have another big game on their hands.
And against an opponent that they should be favored against. Although, ironically, both opponents that had beaten them in very recently. The Seton Hall game, I think we'd all love to have, Lysoled from our brains. And the Georgetown game, while maybe not necessarily as painful, that was a chance to win the Big East championship and couldn't put them away and do it. So whoever it is in that group, again, I hope they approach it with the similar intensity and defensive intensity, if I want to use that word, with whoever they get, because they can run either of those two teams out of the gym when they play their best. And they're setting themselves up for a chance at the title against Villanova or Xavier. I would imagine it'll be Villanova.
Right.
Go play them again. And that, while for as bad as this stretch has been, why would this be a hell of a way to salvage it, to get out of here with the Big East title by chance? As
you're looking at, by the time folks hear this, they will know who Marquette's playing. Do you have a sense of who you'd rather see? I was looking at the bracket kind of before we hopped on here, and I was thinking, I don't know if I want to see Seton Hall. I mean, they're not – Marquette can certainly beat them, but I think Seton Hall is a team that on the right night they could run us out of the gym.
Agree. I'd rather see Georgetown. I thought it was shameful to lose to Georgetown the other day. I just don't think they're all that good. They've gotten better as the season's gone on, but Govan almost looked disinterested for stretches in the game that they beat us. And
he did, yeah.
To me, if it's Georgetown, I agree with you. I think it's a potential run them off the floor game. Yeah, Seton Hall presents problems. I still think we're better than Seton Hall. I still think we should beat Seton Hall. But if I'm betting on it, I think the Hall were 3.5 point favorites if I saw earlier today. Not that I would ever wager on a basketball game. But I think that's around what they were. So
yeah,
the smart folks out there think Seton Hall is a little bit favored tonight. So you're ready either or. Let's just do this. If it's Georgetown again, do not let a Kinjo whoop our ass for 40 minutes like he did the other day. I think Marcus will be fired up for sure. Whatever group of guards that get a chance to guard him, and they'll be ready to play against him.
So before we wrap up here, we're just about at time to wrap, but I think the good people deserve to know on the last pod we had, you were under the weather, you had the flu, you weren't feeling great. You may have gotten yourself some minestrone or some chicken noodle soup, and with this, you've got to be feeling better, right?
It took about 72 hours to come out, but I made my way out. I feel healthy, strong. I am no longer nearly ready to stick my head in the toilet mid-podcast for watching basketball and for physical health. So that is a major positive, and tonight obviously did not deter us from that. So my junk drawer is Tylenol. Yeah, great thing. Really encourage everyone to try it whenever you need it. Great stuff. Saved my life. So I'm just happy to keep playing and then get back at it again tomorrow night. Get back in front of the TV again tomorrow night and hopefully watch another performance similar to this and get back at it.
Marquette will get back at it tomorrow evening. Friday evening, they will be the late game tomorrow night as Xavier and Nova are tipping off at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox Sports 1. So Marquette will likely be tipping off against either Seton Hall or Georgetown around 9 p.m. Eastern. We here at the Real Chili Podcast will certainly all be tuned into that game. We know you will be as well. Brian, any final thoughts from you before we sign off?
I'm swimming in college basketball right now. I'm watching everything I can get that comes across TV screen. All the big conference tournaments are starting up. SEC, I was watching a little bit of that tonight, watching the Big Ten, obviously watching Big East. It's great time with the small conferences.
Watching Buzz lose.
We're watching Buzz lose. Did you see his sideline antics today?
I saw a video of him. I saw a little bit.
God love the man. I mean, he's consistent. He was a maniac when he coached us. He's still a maniac now. If you didn't see it, just scroll through Twitter and type Buzz Williams, and he's just being him. That's all I can say. It's just a great time of year. If you do love the sport, just eat it all up.
That's right. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here on the Real Chili Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Mike Lavender, signing off for Brian Henry. Give us a follow on Twitter at Real Chili Pod. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll talk to you next time here on the Real Chili Podcast.